Hi, I'm Congresswoman Michele Bachmann from Minnesota's 6th Congressional District. We're at a critical time in the history of the Middle East. The overwhelming majority of Americans understand that our alliance with Israel is critical for both of our nations at all times, and that strengthening it now in the face of growing uncertainty and instability throughout the Arab world is just common sense. But shockingly and frankly unforgivably, at this time of unprecedented flux and rising dangers, President Obama just told Israel that Israel has to give up its right to defensible borders in order to appease the Palestinians. That would be the same Palestinians who don't even recognize Israel's right to exist. The president is the most powerful man in the world, but he's not all powerful, and his is not the only voice in America. And when it comes to Israel and Israel's importance to America, his positions are shared by a tiny minority. Most Americans recognize that Israelis and Americans are two sides of the same coin because we share the same values and the same aspirations. We even share the same exceptional mission to be a light to the nations.
You agree on the timetable. What about the rest of the Middle East? You mentioned Israel. Do we continue to support Israel?
You know, Israel is the one democracy in the Middle East, and it has been an ally, and yes, we continue to support them. And not only do we continue to support them, but we do something that we haven't as a country done in many years, which is what we did during the Clinton administration, which is to use our influence to bring the parties to the table to try to reach a just and equitable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we need to do this because, you know, with respect to the Middle East, American families are hanging on by their fingernails right now while we spend $13 billion and our attention and our government's attention over there. It is time for us to refocus at home and start addressing energy, start addressing healthcare, stop going. Chris Shays has been to Iraq 22 times. This district needs a congressperson who is going to focus on the challenges and the issues that the people of this district are facing. And so we need to reorient ourselves to the challenges that our families face.
Okay, I don't know what he just said. He talks beautifully and says, no, I understand the question. It's just he talks a lot and says absolutely nothing. We need to take a tough love stand with Israel. We already know the reason why we had 9/11. Osama bin Laden was clear in our 9/11 Commission report. One of the bombers was very clear about why we were there. We are the problem here. We support the settlements. Condoleezza Rice was just there, exasperated. The settlements, 150 settlements now, no change. They keep growing. We've got hedge funds here financing settlements. We've got wealthy Americans financing settlements. 4 U.S. presidents condemned the settlements, and yet they still happen. We are hated worldwide because of our blind support amid what's happening there. We need to take a tough love stand with Israel and demand that there's a resolution and that the settlements building stop.
Tom, if I could just note, to imply, as Ms. Whitnum has, that the Israelis are directly or indirectly responsible for 9/11 is nothing shy of abominable and just indicates the extent to which she's not paying attention to what is really going on.
I'm paying a lot of attention. Let me tell you something. Since the Second Intifada began on September 2000, when Ariel Sharon walked into a mosque to get himself elected, creating a riot, so much bloodshed, and 8 times as many Arabs as Israelis have been killed, but that's not the point. The majority of the people in the Middle East, 60% of the population is younger than 30 years old, and they have come of age during this time period, Intifada, which is still going on. It's 8 years. The danger of it is this. They are seething. Getting rid of Osama bin Laden at the top, if you don't get rid of the reasons why people hate us, solves absolutely nothing. Jim talks like that because Jim was just in Israel on a 2-day, 48-hour propaganda building trip. He went there from Greenwich, put his arms around Omer. What was that all about, Jim? Was that to get your funding? Did you have to sign any documents to the AIPAC here?
I didn't sign a single document. I didn't take a dime. I went there because Israel is on the sharp point of the spear that was very important to us, which is how we deal with Islamic extremism. And I felt an obligation to go there and actually talk to people. But again, this is really This election is not about these issues. This election is about energy policy. It is about health care. It is about reasserting our leadership economically so that we have jobs and so that we lead this world once again on things like alternative energy and so that we have a health care system that we can be proud of.
You're changing the topic, Jim. I want to talk about that again. How did you get, you didn't answer the question, how do you go from Greenwich, Connecticut to having your arms around Prime Minister Omer? Nobody leaves and goes to talk to Israel for 48 hours during a campaign. Why did you go? Who was the go-between?
I think I explained that. I set this trip up, and it was there to talk to people who are expert on these issues.
We only have 5 minutes left, and there are so many important issues here.
This is the most
one of the ones that relates to
because
this whole...
Because he came back saying...
Excuse me, I really want to move this on.
Tom, he came back and said if Iran attacked Israel, if Iran attacked Israel, that the response
You're not going to set the agenda any further. I'm sorry. We have to stop now, and I have to move it on.
Would be severe. How dare you wage war without...
Question. How do you make the United States Congress do what you want it to do? Answer. Buy it.
How can that be done?
By making sure that a majority of senators and congresspersons are in your pocket, so to speak.
You mean bribe them?
If supporting candidates with massive campaign contributions so that they will do your bidding if they are elected is bribery, then yes, you've hit the nail on the head.
But isn't bribery illegal?
It should be, but very little seems to be done about it. The staggering amounts of money spent on U.S. elections means that it is virtually impossible to tell where campaign contributions originate, and to make things easier, the United States Supreme Court in January 2010 reversed 20 years of restrictions on corporate campaign contributions.
If I wanted to buy Congress, which candidates should I choose? Democrats or Republicans?
Both. Then you can't lose. The winner does what he's told, and the loser isn't going to report you for breaking campaign contribution rules because they've already accepted your tainted money in return for promises to further your political agenda. The system is as safe as houses, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate.
But who would have enough money to do all this?
That's an easy one. AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And if you're wondering where they get the money from, a lot of it comes from the American taxpayer. Every year, loyal U.S. citizens dutifully pay their federal taxes, which are then used for many purposes, one of which is to supply aid in various forms to Israel, currently estimated at being about $3 billion per year. Some of this aid is used to buy U.S.-made weapons, which allow Israel to continuously threaten its neighbors and enables them to finance the hugely expensive apartheid wall, effectively fencing off the Palestinians and making them prisoners in their own land. It is self-evident that some of this money is bound to find its way back to the United States to be used to top up the election campaign funds for politicians, who, when elected, will be very keen to vote even more aid to Israel next time around. So, not only are American taxes being used to support the apartheid state of Israel, some of that money is being used to help elect candidates who are more interested in getting re-elected than they are in America's best interests, which means that Americans are actually paying for the demise of their own democracy. Yet democracy is something which successive U.S. presidents have been crying out is a basic right for everyone on the planet. What hypocrisy! It doesn't much matter which candidate wins, Democrat or Republican, or at what level, congressperson, senator, vice president, or president. He or she, having taken the proverbial 30 pieces of silver, is now expected to do AIPAC's bidding. The penalty for not doing so being the withholding of campaign funds when the next election circus comes to town. But before that happens, the AIPAC circus is coming to town. Washington, that is, May 22nd to May 24th, 2011. But before we take a look at their agenda, I want to explain my pronunciation of the name. In all of these words, the AI combination sounds different. Diamond, daily, pair. So we have a choice. I suspect that the organization prefers AIPAC to deflect attention away from the fact that it has little to do with A for America or Americans. So I prefer to call it AIPAC, because it is definitely I for Israel-centric, as we shall see. The AIPAC Policy Conference is the pro-Israel community's preeminent annual gathering. The event attracts more than 6,000 community and student activists from all 50 states, and more than half of the Senate, a third of the House of Representatives, and countless Israeli and American policymakers and thought leaders. And so on and so forth. But it's a one-way street. Take a look at some of the issues on the agenda. You won't find much that has to do with America or Americans. Example: Israel didn't like the Goldstone report on its savage attack on Gaza in December 2008 and January 2009, so AIPAC pushed the United States Senate to vote to rescind United Nations support for the report and take no further action against Israel under its recommendations. The resolution, which passed by unanimous consent on April 14th and was sponsored by Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Jim Risch, comes after Justice Richard Goldstone retracted the central claims of his controversial report that falsely accused Israel of targeting civilians during its caste-led military campaign. For the record, Goldstone, who was a Zionist, was put under enormous pressure by Israel to make his retractions. But the Pandora's box of Israeli atrocities had already been opened.
4 people died here, all women, shot. Having bulldozed the place, the Israelis destroyed the village water tower. The only houses left standing were those the occupying troops had camped in, or positioned snipers in. In the house they'd occupied, Israeli soldiers left some writing on the wall. "Gaza, here we are," one read. "You can run, but you can't hide. Make war, not peace. Arabs need to die. If you can take it, there's worse to come." Zaytun, a few miles north, also flattened by Israeli bulldozers. But in this house, they'd herded 100 members of the Samuni clan. And then they shelled it, killing 49 of them. The mass funeral wake is in its final day.
In September 2009, Judge Goldstone had this to say.
The mission concluded that actions amounting to war crimes, and possibly in some respects crimes against humanity, were committed by the Israel Defense Force.
But in his recent retraction, Goldstone now characterizes the killing of 29 members of the Samuni family as an accident.
She's saying if it was an accident, why they could enter our home with 18 members in it and kill my husband, murder him in front of all of these kids.
So why are these two trying to cover up Israel's appalling human rights record? And what's the going rate for that service rendered by this pair of Roman Catholic senators, one Democrat and one Republican? 30 pieces of silver for their campaign coffers? Or a bit more to take care of inflation? Or what about swimming pools for their back gardens? I wonder if they've seen what the IDF did with their battle tanks in some poor Palestinian's back garden, or rather the agricultural fields that their very livelihoods depend upon. Someone will flag this video as inappropriate if I show the bodies of some of the over 300 children killed, or some of the over 1,600 injured in that walled and fenced-in prison, but I can show you pictures of those responsible for their deaths and horrific injuries. There are many other Israel-centric issues on its 2011 agenda, but this attempt at covering up the Goldstone report says it all as to what AIPAC is really all about, trying to protect apartheid Israel from its ever-growing number of critics. It is unconscionable, and every decent American should rise up and shout, "Enough is enough." In this graphic, the orange represents the population of the United States, approximately 310 million citizens, while the P represents the membership of AIPAC, a mere 100,000 people, a pressure group whose clearly stated aims and ambitions put the interests of Israel above and beyond any other consideration. Which means that AIPAC is, to all intents and purposes, the voice of America, and only when the voices of the majority of United States citizens are heard will this gross imbalance be redressed. This organization is doing something about it, aptly named Move Over AIPAC. Look them up on the internet and give them all the support you can. Others to look for are Stop IPAC and Students Against IPAC. How much longer can America afford to be squeezed for money, armaments, and the lives of its children in conflicts that have little strategic benefit for Americans, but which are turning more and more of the world against them? Take America back before it's too late.